Hello everyone, Mariko Berg, residential realtor with the Bridgewell Real Estate Group, and welcome back to the Bridgewell Group YouTube channel where I talk about all things real estate, particularly in myself and my team's market, which is the Greater Vancouver and Fraser Valley areas of British Columbia, Canada. So make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. And today's video is going to be talking about the Contingency Reserve Fund. And so I'm going to be breaking down what is the Contingency Reserve Fund. Just as a quick recap, it is a savings account for the strata. So I'm going to be talking about condos and townhouses, for example, those types of properties. I'm going to be getting into a math example of how to calculate unit entitlement, what the relationship is between strata fees, the annual operating budget, and the Contingency Reserve Fund, where to find this CRF, and how all of these things tie into these capital cost projects and special levies so that you can figure out whether or not a strata is essentially within your budget or outside of your budget based on upcoming projects. This is a very, very important video. It is a little bit technical, but let's just get into it. So starting off with what is the Contingency Reserve Fund? The Contingency Reserve Fund, also known as the CRF, is going to be relating to strata properties. So think condos and townhouses. And so essentially your strata fees, your monthly maintenance fee that you pay on the first of every month is going towards two different things. It's broken down towards paying the strata's annual operating budget. Then the other portion is going to this Contingency Reserve Fund. And so that CRF is essentially the strata's savings generally used for larger capital cost projects. So think like a roof, plumbing, maybe a depreciation report. Those bigger expenses that typically don't happen annually are going to be what is taken generally out of the Contingency Reserve Fund or by form of a special levy or both. In British Columbia, Canada, effective November 1st, 2023, strata corporations and sections are required to annually contribute a minimum of 10% of the annual operating fund to the Contingency Reserve Fund every single year. The contributions to the CRF are approved in the annual budget by majority vote of owners. Contingency Reserve Fund expenditures are usually identified in advance by a depreciation report and must be approved by the owners unless it is for emergency repairs or insurance deductibles that are a common expense. So these CRF expenditures are typically approved at an annual general meeting or a special general meeting that is called by the strata in which owners would attend. Other funds may also be added to the CRF, such as surplus funds or sale of assets. And the CRF is typically a separate bank account for the strata that again is held specifically for these particular projects. So getting into a visual representation of what the Contingency Reserve Fund looks like relative to things like your strata fees, the capital cost project, and say a special levy, also known as a special assessment, I've put it all up on this board here for you. So starting off with your strata fees, as I mentioned before, the strata fees are broken down into two different lines. So part of it is going to pay your annual operating budget, and the other portion is going to that Contingency Reserve Fund savings for capital cost projects. So really similar to how your income and your paycheck probably works, you have a portion that goes towards paying your life and what it costs to live your life, and then you have another portion that's going to your savings. Stratas work in exactly the same way. And so let's say that you have a capital cost project, and the perfect example is going to be a roof, okay? So that CRF is there to help pay those infrequent expenses, exactly like a roof, that are generally those bigger capital cost projects, right? This is your money account, you're gonna go pay that big bill. So there are going to be situations where maybe your Contingency Reserve Fund equals the amount that is going to be for this roof expense, right? So you probably don't want to drain your entire savings. There are also going to be situations where this costs more than what you have in your savings account. So what do you do in those kind of situations where you don't want to drain your whole savings or you have a difference between what is owed and what you have? That is called a special levy or a special assessment. And so this special levy is going to be calculated by way of your unit entitlement, which is essentially like the smaller units pay less of the total bill. The bigger units pay more of the total bill. It's all based on your size relative to the whole building. Your strata fees are calculated based on unit entitlement, and your special levies are also calculated based on unit entitlement. So before I get into a numerical example of how this all works, I kind of want to explain the relationship between the strata fees, the CRF, and the annual operating budget a little bit more here. So again, going back to what I said before, the Contingency Reserve Fund in BC needs to be a minimum of 10% of the annual operating budget. So anytime you're looking at the strata documents, that's the first thing you want to check is if they're in compliance with these regulations. So you can see what the annual operating budget is generally on the AGM documents, and then you'll also be able to see what that annual contingency contribution is in that same place. And you just do a simple calculation to make sure that it is 10% or greater. Now, again, when we are talking about the Contingency Reserve Fund, these are all going to be expenditures or contributions that are approved at an annual general meeting or special general meeting, but primarily the annual general meeting, which of course happens once a year. So the strata is going to be looking at the operating budget. Are we in a deficit? Are we in a surplus? Do we have inflation occurring? How are those numbers going to change? And then they are also going to be looking at the Contingency Reserve Fund and potentially the depreciation report if they have one, and say, okay, the building is aging. These are the things that we should be thinking about moving forward to hypothetically help to minimize special levies in the future for owners. So if the Contingency Reserve Fund contribution has to go up because you are expecting more capital cost projects in the future, then hypothetically, unless the annual operating budget comes down or a line is adjusted for here, then strata fees should also go up. Now, if you have a different situation, right, where inflation is occurring, as we see so often, the annual operating budget increases, again, the strata fees generally have to increase. So you are going to see this relationship play out in the documents, and it's definitely something that you should be aware of and generally expect that as costs increase, strata fees will likely have to increase as well. So getting into an example of how we tie all of this together, I'm going to be going through calculating the unit entitlement for a particular unit, and then helping you guys calculate what a special levy would be for a capital cost project that exceeds the amount that is in the Contingency Reserve Fund right now. So let's say that we have a 334 unit tower or double tower strata. So the maintenance fee for the particular unit that you're interested in is $384.88. So in order to calculate the unit entitlement, which again is how strata fees are calculated, it's how special levies are calculated, we want to divide this number that I pay on a monthly basis by the total amount of strata fees that are collected for a particular month. So in this particular situation, it's about $127K. So all I have to do is divide what I pay versus what everybody pays all together, and that's how I get my unit entitlement, which I've rounded off to 0.00301. So in this situation, we have an annual operating budget of just about 1.4 mil, and then we have a Contingency Reserve Fund annual contribution of 235K roughly. So this means that we are above the 10% minimum, so that's great, right? But let's say that we have an upcoming roof project that is $500,000. So $500,000 is obviously more than the 235K that we have in our savings. So what needs to happen if we need to get this roof project done? There has to be a special levy, a special assessment in order to fund that difference, right? So by way of an annual general meeting, the strata is probably going to propose a couple different options. They could propose all special levy, okay? So that is option one, right? Or they could propose option two, which is a portion by the CRF and then a portion by special levy. In this particular situation, we don't have an option where the contingency can fund the whole roof project, but that would be a hypothetical option three. It's just not on the table for this particular situation. So in the special levy situation, I have to calculate, okay, if they did a $500,000 special levy, what would that mean for me, the person paying $384.88 per month? So all I have to do is use the same unit entitlement, and I go 500,000 times 0.00301, and that means it's $1,500. So if they special level me 500K, I multiply it by 0.00301, and that's $1,505. not so scary. Like, it's not really the end of the world, right? If they special levied us $500K, we just have to know that and we have to have that expectation. But for this unit, it's only $1,500. Now, let's say that they did a portion by CRF and a portion by special levy. So let's say we took out $100K from the CRF, and now this CRF is down to $135K roughly, right? And then we fund the rest. So 500K minus 100K is 400K by special levy. Then what we would do is we would do the same thing times 0.00301, and we would get a lower number than before. That means in this situation, it's 1204 for this particular unit. So when a strata is presenting these options at the general meeting, the owners are going to vote, and by way of majority vote, they're going to decide what the best option is for the strata as a whole. So that is why it is so important to attend these annual general meetings, because these are the decisions that are going to impact you and are going to impact the strata and what their contingency is moving forward. So here, people very well may say, oh, for the extra $300 a month, or not $300 a month, $300 for this special levy, I would rather have more in the bank than drain it down to 135K and save 300 bucks. That might be somebody saying, yeah, I would rather pay all special levy. But other people, that $300 might make a big difference, so they might vote that down. So that's the whole point of these annual general meetings, is just to get together and then decide how you're going to manage this particular capital cost expense moving forward. So where can you find information on the Contingency Reserve Fund? You can find it in the Form B document that should be ordered by the listing agent or the seller and provided to you as a part of the subject removal period. It is going to have important things like the Contingency Reserve Fund amount as of a particularly specified date. It's also going to have details on whether the strata is operating in a budget deficit or a surplus, and important information on your maintenance fee, parking stall number, storage locker number if you have one, and those other important things relating to the particular unit that you're looking at. Another place that you can find information about the Contingency Reserve Fund is the depreciation report. And so the depreciation report is a document that is obtained by the strata, generally from an engineering firm, where the engineering firm is going to come in and assess the different components of the building or the complex for the strata and determine where it's at in its lifespan to help the strata plan for these capital cost projects in the future. So in that report, it's going to say it's in good condition, it's this average lifespan, and this is how much it's going to cost, whether that be the roof, the painting, the ceiling, the balcony membranes. All of these things are going to be in this report. And then there are generally going to be different funding models, often 3 different funding models, where it assesses what the contingency contribution is currently at, where it needs to be in the future, and hypothetical special levies that could come up depending on how the strata decides to proceed with the various contingency contribution models presented. So the depreciation report is not a be-all, end-all. It's not definitive. The strata could follow it, they could not follow it. But essentially, you're going to want to make sure that you attend those annual general meetings so that you understand how the contingency is being used, what capital cost projects people are planning in the future, and then how potentially they might be funding them as well. Thank you so much for watching this video on the Contingency Reserve Fund. I hope that it wasn't too boring for you and that it covered a lot of what you need to know. Again, my name is Mariko Berg and I'm a residential realtor in the Greater Vancouver and Fraser Valley areas with my team, the Bridgewell Real Estate Group. We help buyers, sellers, investors all around our area, so definitely feel free to reach out to us if you are looking for a realtor to help represent you. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already for more videos like this in the future, and I will see you guys later. See ya.